Sorry for the delay, guys. For those of you who've been on my page for a while, you know I work 3 jobs. It's always crazy, but we do these as we can. Okay, so now we're talking part 2. So I am like in shock. Like, what are you talking about? He unalived his daughter. Like, what? Like, first of all, none of it was making any sense. The fact that he got married and didn't tell me didn't make any sense. The fact that he had a baby that passed away and didn't tell me didn't make any sense. And now they're telling me that he unalived the baby. And it was like my world was spinning. Like, again, a picture of somebody sitting on your couch and telling you these things about your dad. And you're like, what the hell are you talking about, right? And I, at that point, went from like, I won't tell you shit to like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you have him admitting to it? Like, what are you even talking about? So then they start saying, you know, he raised you part of the time. And I was like, yes, he raised me part of the time. And they said, okay, was he ever abusive? And I was like, I don't know where this is going. Like, I don't feel good about this. Can I call him? Like, something seems very wrong. And they're like, you can't call him. So I'm sitting here on this couch and I'm like, what is going on? My adoptive mother, of course, is like sobbing in the corner. And I'm like, I literally cannot even deal with you right now. If you guys know, she's a very, very, very bad person. And this was like her opportunity for like it was a whole thing. And so I'm trying to ignore the crap out of her. And I'm trying to get to the story, like what exactly happened. And so they were like, well, we have him on tape admitting to unaliving her. And I was like, so why are you sitting here in my living room? Like, why are you here if you have him admitting to unaliving her? And they were like, well, because his confession got thrown out. And I was like, so his confession got thrown out, so he didn't actually kill her. And they were like, well, that's not what it means. It just means we can't use his confession, but he confessed to it. And I'm like, can you tell me like what exactly happened? And they said, did he have struggle with addiction issues? And I was like, he has struggled with addiction issues, like obviously. And they were like, was he abusive when he was with you? And I was like, I don't feel comfortable telling you anything. Like, you guys, this doesn't feel right. So then they like start getting pissed off, right? And they're like, so you would protect somebody who unalived a baby. And I was like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying I'm protecting anybody. I'm saying like, I don't have anything to give you. I don't know anything about this baby. I don't know anything about the situation. You're telling me that he admitted to it. Why are you asking me questions? I have nothing to give you. I literally have no information for you. And I think that they thought going in that he had admitted something to me or that he had told me. Not a word, you guys. Like, and then they started to think, well, isn't it weird that he didn't tell you he had a baby? Isn't it weird that he hid that? And I was like, a lot of this is weird. Like, what are you talking about? They're like, do you know he also had somebody else pregnant with twins at the time? And I was like, what? So then I found out that the same time that she was pregnant with this baby, he had gotten another girl pregnant and she was having twins. And I guess he had forced her into having, no longer having the kids because he didn't want any kids. And so then he had this baby, right? So they're like, so he didn't want those babies. He didn't want any babies. And then all of a sudden he was living with a baby. Do you think that one made him angry? I'm like, I don't know. Like, they kept trying to push me. And I don't know how long this interview lasted, but they kept trying to push me into admitting that I knew something. I knew shit. I didn't know anything, okay? And so I'm just sitting here and they were like, do you know the baby's name? And I was like, I think so. Like, I saw it on the back of the car. And so they tell me her name and they're like, let's tell you a little bit about the timeline. I'm like, great. So then they tell me that the baby is born and him and his wife had gotten married. The baby's born. And not long after the baby comes home, the baby ends up, you know, in the emergency room. And then she's in the emergency room and she passed a couple of days later, or maybe like a day later after she arrives at the emergency room. And then they buried her, and like literally they buried her and he came down the next day to see me and my daughter. And I was thinking to myself, like, how do you bury your baby and then come down to see me, especially if you unalived her? Like, guys, I'm sorry. It's just, this story's hard to tell because it is filled with so much emotion. So I was like, okay, so you're telling me that he unalived his baby and then he came and he saw me and my baby. And they're like, don't you think that's weird? I'm like, yes, fucking yes, but I don't have anything to give you. I don't have anything to give you. And so they were like, well, okay, so what do you think it would take for you to like remember stuff, like how he might have treated you and I was like, I don't have to tell you anything. Like, you guys should have enough evidence. And so they're like, okay, have you ever seen a picture of her? And I was like, no. And they were like, okay, do you want to see a picture of her? We have one. And I was like, yeah, I mean, I want to see a picture of her. And they pull up their laptop and all of a sudden they pull up autopsy photos of the baby. And I had never seen her before. And all of a sudden I'm seeing this baby with like her skull, the top of her skull gone, and like her chest cracked open. And I will never forget those images as long as I live. I'm haunted to this day by them, okay? So they tell me that they're going to show me a picture of my niece. I look at the screen and it's her autopsy photos, and it's horrific. It was horrific. And they were like, she didn't deserve that. And I was like, I'm not saying that she deserved anything. I don't know her. I don't know anything about the baby. And they said, was he abusive to you? And when I saw those pictures of her, something like clicked in me, like she deserves justice. And so I was like, you said you have a confession. They were like, we have him on tape confessing. And I was like, I want to see it. I want to see it. And they were like, okay. So they pull up the tape of his interview where he confessed to what he did to her. And I'm watching him on this tape confessing to them what he did to her. They had picked him up the day that they were supposed to go look at caskets for the baby. They had picked him up, and like right before they left the house to get caskets, they'd picked him up. They took him to the police station. They promised him that if he confessed, that he could go home that day. And he confessed. And I don't know how long the interview lasted. I don't know what kind of interview tactics they used. I saw part of the interview like before he confessed and his confession, and hearing those words come out of his mouth about what he did to her, I also will always remember the confession tape. Like and I was like, he confessed. I just saw this autopsy photo. I can't cover for him. I can't cover for that. I will not cover for that. But you have to understand, when that's like your dad and you're in this moment, you're having to decide to sever all ties that protect him at all from you, any protection. When it was so ingrained in us that all we had was each other. We grew up very abusive, and he was all I had, and we were raised and you only have each other. We only had each other. And all of a sudden I'm having to decide if my loyalty to him overrides my loyalty to that innocent baby, and it did not. And you can think what you want about me, you can say what you want about me, but when I saw that baby, my loyalty to him stopped right there, because you don't hurt a child. You do not, like, ever. So they said, we'll ask you again, was he abusive to you? And I said, yes, like, but I can't tell you that he unalived the baby, because I have no idea anything about her. They're like, well, you know, we kind of want to prove, like, if he had problems, like, did he have problems with addiction? And I was like, yes, he had problems with addiction. They're like, tell us about when he used to, you know, have these things. And I just told him a couple instances. Like, one night he came home, he was extremely drunk, he was belligerent. It was probably like 2 a.m, he's banging on the door. I have to go to school the next day. So I get up, I'm angry. I open the door and I say, some of us have to go to school in a couple of hours. And he got so pissed that he grabbed me and he dragged me to the balcony and he dangled me over the second-story balcony. And I was screaming because I thought I was going to die that night. And our roommate came in and pulled him off of me. I ran to the bathroom, locked myself in the bathroom. There were instances where he would come home just so completely intoxicated, so on a binge, like he would go missing for days at a time, and he would just beat the living crap out of me. And that's what was normal. And the sad part was, guys, is like living like that with him was the happiest I'd ever been. That was the most free I'd ever been. That was the most loved I've ever been. And that was like the freest I'd ever felt. So I didn't understand how bad that was until now that I'm an adult and I think about it. So I tell them, like, yes, he was abusive, but like, I'm still thinking at that time, like, I was really happy. And I told him he was very good to me. He loved me very much. And he tried his best to take care of me. And they're like, well, but he was abusive. And I'm like, well, I mean, I guess, but like, he struggled with addiction. And they're like, so tell us about like his drinking habits. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, I feel like I'm throwing this kid all the way under the bus.